Hi everyone, welcome back to the Recap Project. Today I'll be recapping the drama sci-fi film Predestination. Spoilers ahead, let's begin. The movie opens with a quote: "If the man that ruined your entire life was put in front of you, would you kill him?" A secret agent is seen walking across a hallway carrying 2 suitcases. He heads to the basement of the building and unveils a container attached with a time bomb. He opens his first briefcase, which unfolds into a gadget. He takes out some tools and begins defusing the bomb. He notices the presence of another person, immediately pulling out his gun. As he turns his back looking for the enemy, they take him by surprise and land a shot. Firefight ensues, but time is running out. The agent immediately drops his guard and tries to contain the bomb in the gadget. However, he is too late as the bomb explodes, knocking him back and burning his face. Through the agony, he tries to reach for the second case. His enemy appears, but he surprisingly helps the agent. They briefly stare at each other before the other person walks away. The agent then frantically opens the case, and the scene cuts to him later covered in bandages. He opens his eyes to see 2 posters with strange messages. His supervisors arrive and commend him for his efforts. He asks where the bomber is, but they tell him to rest and forget about the bomber, but also reminding him of the critical nature of his upcoming final mission. Later that night, a monologue explains that the bomber was a famous elusive criminal dubbed the Fizzle Bomber, who has committed countless acts of terrorism throughout the years. He looks at a photograph of ruined buildings, March 1975, saying that this was his grand plan, leaving over 11,000 people dead. Everything they've done have failed, but this was the closest attempt. He mutters to himself, just one more try. The doctor is shown removing his bandages, telling him he will sufficiently heal for his final mission. But his appearance and voice will be completely different. A screen briefly shows his psychological assessment, which seems problematic, with the doctor commenting on how he's the agent with the most field hours he's ever attended to. The agent looks into a mirror to see a stranger looking back. The scene jumps to 7 years later, after the man's face had fully healed and reformed. He speaks into a recorder, saying that he's been finally given the order to deploy for the mission. He is dressed and armed, and is reminded that if he deviates from his mission, he will be sentenced to death by lethal injection. He agrees to this, and then is handed a watch and the suitcase from earlier. The scene shifts to a small city bar at night. The agent is working undercover as a bartender. He checks his watch, November 1970. A stranger in a coat walks into the bar. Some people comment on how he looks like a freak. The stranger orders a drink, commenting on how the bartender is new, revealing themselves into the light. They make small talk, commenting on how people are staying at home fearing the Fizzle Bomber. During the talk, the bartender makes a random comment about the chicken and the egg, and what really comes first. The conversation then shifts to the stranger revealing themselves to be a writer, author of a column called The Unmarried Mother, writing confession stories for a living. The bartender says he knows about it, and shows that he reads their stories. The stranger is surprised that a bartender would read these kind of stories, with the bartender replying that he's surprised a man would understand a woman's angle so well. The stranger tells him he wouldn't believe the story if he tells it. The bartender beckons him to continue, saying that after working as a bartender, nothing really astonishes him anymore. The stranger takes a puff from their cigarette and tells the bartender that he was once a girl. In 1945, she was left at an orphanage doorstep with nothing but a name, Jane. As a child, Jane was curious about outer space and grew to love it. But she was envious of other kids with parents and wondered why she was abandoned. She made a solemn vow that her children would have a real family with a father and a mother. As she got older, she felt like something was different about her. She was often teased by other kids, but she was stronger than any of them. She was also top of the class, taking an interest in mathematics and physics. The other kids teased her more as a result. She grew to hate herself, realizing that she would never be adopted due to her differences to other girls, telling herself that she would never become someone's wife as she's a freak. As Jane is about to graduate, she meets Mr. Robertson, who was looking for young women like Jane for a job in a government agency called Space Corp. Jane comments on how women weren't allowed to become astronauts, but Mr. Robertson says that they were a bit more progressive. He saw Jane as a strong candidate, commenting on how he notices that she's a strong brawler. Jane accepts the invitation and arrives at the interview. She takes note that the other candidates were respectable types, as she puts it, and has a thought about their purpose being merely to entertain the men in space missions. During the interview, she cracks a joke that, to the other candidates, thought might be an unfamiliar territory, but the main interviewer sternly makes it clear that he wasn't looking for liberal women, instructing her to take her glasses off. She begins telling the interviewer about her interest in science and her achievements at school, but he cuts her off, asking her if she's been with a man, commenting about the discipline problems in her file. Jane snaps back, saying that she was serious about the organization and has no intention of being a tourist, which angers the interviewer but pleases Mr. Robertson. Jane gets accepted, and her training begins. She's exposed to advanced simulations of space, which makes her feel alive and brimming with excitement at the sight of space travel, while others struggled. They were put under endurance and written tests, which Jane passes with flying colors. She is also put onto psychological tests, where she once again expresses that something feels wrong about her, and that she doesn't fit in with the other girls. Later, Jane gets into a fight with one of the other candidates, but she wins easily. They're both taken to a doctor for an examination. and the doctor reveals they found something peculiar in Jane's body, and that they will have to disqualify her because of it. Jane is seen packing her bags, thinking that she was disqualified because of the fight. Robertson approaches her, telling her that he will do everything in his power to get her back into the program, assuring her that this will not be the end. After that, Jane had to support herself. She worked as a house helper for cheap during the day, which was when she discovered confession magazines. She also went to etiquette school at night in hopes of changing the director's mind, saying that this was the first time she felt like she wasn't very good at something. One rainy night, Jane accidentally bumps into a man and apologizes. She asks if he's lost, and he says that he's waiting for someone. She replies that good things happen to those who wait, with the man finishing the quote, "But only the things left behind by those who hustle." A quote from Abraham Lincoln. The man was handsome, rich, commenting about how he actually had wads of $100 bills in his pocket, more money than she's ever seen, and had complimented her with a kindness that she's never experienced before. He then asks the bartender whether he's done anything stupid for love before, to which he replies once, and he understands how Jane felt. She continues with her story, saying that the period of her life with that man was the happiest in her life, but it only lasted there. One night, the man told Jane to wait at a park bench for just a moment and he'll be right back, but he never returned. She quickly goes on to say that she moved on and went back to her old life when she gets a visit from an old friend. Robertson begins by explaining that to keep its citizens safe, certain government operations are kept confidential, and he's part of an organization that sits above Space Corp, an organization with the purpose to reshape wrongdoings. Space Corp, along with other agencies, are used as a means of finding extraordinary people. Jane remarks that she is confused, but Robertson continues, the work that the agency does is complicated, requiring people that have no families or friends, yet possessing remarkable motor skills and intellect. Robertson refused to elaborate for the time being, but she thought it would change her life for the better. This was until she realized the man left her pregnant, and Robertson never appeared in her life again. Her bright future was over before it began. Jane goes to a charity ward, having never felt so alone before. One day, Jane finds herself in agony on an operating table surrounded by nurses and doctors. In the morning, Jane wakes up, with a doctor coming in and telling her that the operation was successful, and the baby was a healthy little girl. But the surgeon kept talking, asking her if she's ever had a full examination of her body before. With a confused Jane, the doctor explains that she has 2 complete sets of reproductive organs, both immature, male and female. And despite being underdeveloped, the female set was good enough to have a baby, but due to excessive bleeding from birth, they were forced to perform a hysterectomy, removing her female organs. However, they were able to reconstruct her male section successfully, but will have to undergo more surgeries. Jane is shocked by the news and gets teary, but the doctor assures her that she is young, and her bones will readjust and her life can continue. Jane starts to care for her baby daughter, telling her she was the best thing that's ever happened to her. She names the baby after herself, determined to raise the baby properly. However, the baby was kidnapped, taken away from the hospital nursery. The police tried everything, but they could never find a single trace of this person. Then there was her other problem. Jane had to undergo 3 major operations to reshape her into a man. Her voice did not sound masculine, however, so she practiced talking like a man every night, feeling like she's losing herself in the process. 11 months later, Jane is gone. Every time she looks into the mirror, she's reminded of the man that ruined her life. She didn't know a trade, couldn't drive a car. She even attempted to re-enlist into Space Corp as a man, but one look from any doctor could tell she was unfit for space travel. She tells the bartender about her bitterness, and that sometimes maybe the world deserves to be punished. She could see it in the bartender's eyes too. Jane changes her name to John and moves to New York, eventually leading to his career of becoming the unmarried mother, concluding her story. The bartender then asks the question, if the man that ruined your entire life was put in front of you, would you kill him? With John saying that he would without hesitation. The bartender says he knows exactly where the man is and can lead John to him. John doesn't trust the bartender, but the bartender reveals that he works for the same organization as Mr. Robertson, finally convincing John to follow him. The agent explains that he will give John this opportunity in exchange for a favor, with the favor being John to try out his job afterwards. If he doesn't like it, he can walk away. John agrees, and the agent brings out his kit, explaining that it's a time machine, taking out 2 guns. John is skeptical, but the bartender stands close to him and tells him to stay still. The 2 of them disappear from the cellar. The 2 reappear at a different time, April 1963. John couldn't believe what had just happened. The agent throws him some clothes and cash while briefing him where the man is. The agent says that the organization he works for is called the Temporal Bureau. Time travel was invented in 1983. He's one of 11 temporal agents, preventing crimes before they take place. The agent then explains that the man that ruined John's life might be the Fizzle Bomber, and tells him to intercept and kill the man before he meets Jane. He wishes John luck and heads off. The time has come, and John waits in the exact spot he was instructed. He gets strange looks from people around him while he searches for the man. Out of nowhere, a girl bumps into him. She apologizes and asks if he's lost, with him swiftly replying that he's waiting for someone. The girl then tells him that good things happen to those who wait. with John piecing the pieces together, replying without thinking, only the things left behind by those who hustle. Jane smiles happily and replies that she was thinking the same thing. John tells her that she looks beautiful and someone should have told her that, remembering how much of a freak she thought she was. Jane happily replies, "You just did." While this is happening, the agent watches from a distance, but then promptly leaves, deviating from his mission, wanting to try again to stop the Fizzle bomber. This time he catches the bomber as he was setting the charges, but he misses his shot. He chases after the bomber, but the bomber flanks him. They get into a short fight, but the bomber knocks him down. When the agent wakes up, he hears familiar gunshots. He rushes over to see his past self burning. He runs over to help him reach his field kit, gazing at each other briefly. He realizes that certain events are inevitable. John and Jane sit at a coffee shop. The two converse, Jane opening up about her insecurities, and is amazed at how much John understands her. John painfully falls for the girl. He didn't realize how charming she was. While this happens, the agent waits beside a hallway until Robertson appears behind him. The agent hands over a piece of the bomb he found at the crime scene, to which Robertson realizes he made an illegal jump to try to change the past. Robertson mentions how each jump causes damage to his brain, but to his surprise, also saying how an agent working outside of regulations could save so many more lives. The agent is reluctant to proceed with the next step of the plan, saying that this would cause so much pain to her. But Robertson reminds him that she's a gift to the world through a predestination paradox. Having saved millions of lives, he must lay the seeds for the future to ensure their existence. The truth is finally unveiled. As the agent enters a hospital ward, the two share a passionate kiss. The agent then wishes Jane good luck as the baby is left at the doorstep of the orphanage. The agent arrives back at the bench, 2 months after leaving John, in clear view of the two. John sees the agent and tells Jane he'll be right back. Feeling deceived, John pulls out his gun and calls the agent a sick bastard. The agent apologizes, but says that some things are inevitable. John tells the agent that he loves Jane and refuses to leave. The agent then makes John understand who Jane needs to become, and the series of events that need to happen in this order, telling him to come to the organization where Robertson will explain everything. John is speechless after coming to realize that this was the only option. Later at the agency, the two is observing John, as Robertson explains that he needed to endure his entire life in order to become the agent that saves millions of lives. The agent then expresses concern that the Fizzle bomber still hasn't been caught yet, but Robertson reassures him that the sequence of events is playing correctly, as the Fizzle bomber is what initiated the agency and made the organization into what it is. John frowns at this, saying that the bomber is a terrorist and should not be seen in any other way. Robertson hands the agent a file, telling him he's officially retired and is given one last jump before his kit decommissions. The two bid each other farewell, and the agent makes the jump to New York 1975. The agent sits down, ready to begin his retirement life, but to his surprise, the kit malfunctions and fails to decommission. He frantically opens the file and sees several leads that were found after investigating the piece of the time bomb, with a note saying, "Trace the purchase order, Robertson." Meaning Robertson must have rigged the kit to allow him to operate outside the agency. Over the coming weeks, the agent spends his time tracking the bomber. He also begins writing a novel about his life, titled Time, Love, and an Unmarried Mother, by Jane John Doe. The revelation here being that he was a future version of John all along. His final mission's goal was to ensure his past selves meet, give birth to Jane, steal the baby, and place her in the orphanage, ensuring the cycle continues. His entire existence was the predestined paradox. He finally tracks down the bomber to a laundromat, but he is in disbelief to see a twitchy, disgusting elderly man, that is himself. The bomber smiles and tells John that he forgot how good he looked. John calls him a murderer, having killed so many innocents, but the bomber quickly explains that he saved innumerous lives, killing a few to save countless more than the agency could have ever done. He frantically brings out a notebook, pointing at events that never took place. A chemical spill that killed 324 people. The driver never made it to work that morning. 1,861 lives saved in Germany. A terrorist organization that he blew up, saving 3,027 people. John asks about the Grand New York bombing, to which the bomber replies it's inevitable. John will become him as their entire lives are predestined. Also telling John that he should instead learn to love him again, as they would make a great team. John then sadly repeats the quote, "If the man that ruined your entire life was put in front of you, would you kill him?" Before shooting the bomber, everything finally fits in place. Jane's entire life flashes before John's eyes, from her troubled upbringing to becoming John, to his days as a temporal agent. Back at the bench, John is shown telling his past how much he loves her still, and how he misses her dreadfully. Pretty fucked up, right?